Have you ever poured your whole heart into a handmade gift only to have it thrown on the floor and receive a slap across the face that left your cheek burning? That night I stood in my stepmother's kitchen with shaking hands, unaware that the strike was the spark that would burn my old life down. I never expected the person to change the game would be my quiet cousin who finally stood up to reveal the ugly truth behind that gift. My name is Angelina Larson, and at 29 years old, I was hiding in the guest bathroom of my own father's house, pressing a bag of frozen peas against my left cheek. The cold burn of the ice was the only thing grounding me, fighting against the throbbing heat that radiated from the impact site. Through the thin drywall, I could hear them. They were laughing. The sound was sharp and brittle, like breaking glass, drifting in from the living room where the party was still in full swing. It was the sound of a world that had seamlessly moved on, a world where my humiliation was just a hiccup in the evening's schedule. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The bathroom light was unforgiving, fluorescent and harsh. It highlighted the redness blooming across my skin, the distinct outline of fingers beginning to darken into a bruise that would likely turn a sickly purple by morning. This was Ridgeview, Colorado, a place of manicured lawns and polite neighbors, where violence was supposed to be something you watched on the evening news, not something that happened between a stepmother and an adult stepdaughter over a birthday gift. The gift. The thought of it made my stomach turn. For the past 2 months, I had spent every free evening working on it. It was a keepsake box, hand-carved from a block of reclaimed walnut wood. I was not a carpenter by trade, but I had learned the basics just for this. I had sanded it until the wood felt like silk against the fingertips. I had oiled it until the grains sang with deep, rich chocolate tones. Inside, I had placed a collection of restored photographs, pictures of my father, Elaine, and Savannah from the early days, back when I still foolishly believed we were blending into a family. I had also included a scarf I had knitted myself, a soft cashmere blend in deep emerald, Elaine's favorite color. It was not something you could buy at a mall. It was hours of my life, knots of anxiety and hope tied together with yarn and wood glue. It was supposed to be a peace offering. It was supposed to say, "I see you. Please see me." I closed my eyes, and the memory of 10 minutes ago played behind my eyelids like a film reel I could not stop. The living room had been warm, smelling of expensive catering and Elaine's overpowering floral perfume. It was her 50th birthday, a milestone event she had been planning for 6 months. The room was packed with aunts, uncles, and cousins, a sea of people holding wine glasses and making polite conversation. Savannah, my stepsister, had just presented her gift. It was a designer handbag, small and leather, with a logo that screamed money. I knew exactly how much it cost because I was the one who paid the credit card bills for this house. Even if my name was only technically on the mortgage as a formality, Savannah had beamed. Elaine had squealed like a teenager, and the room had applauded the display of affection and wealth. Then it was my turn. I remembered stepping forward, the wooden box heavy in my hands. I felt proud of it. That was the pathetic part. I actually felt proud. "Happy birthday, Elaine," I had said, offering it to her with a smile that felt fragile. Elaine had taken the box, her manicured nails tapping against the wood. She expected jewelry. I could see it in the way her eyes lit up, then dimmed instantly when she lifted the lid. She pulled out the scarf, letting it dangle from 2 fingers like a dead rodent. Then she looked at the photos. She did not smile. She did not tear up. She chuckled. It was a dry, hollow sound. "Wood?" she asked, her voice carrying easily over the sudden hush of the room. "And knitting?" "I made it," I explained, my voice faltering. "I thought you might like something personal. The photos are from the trip to the lake, and the scarf is cashmere." Elaine looked at Savannah, then back at me. "Savannah gives me Italian leather. You give me a craft project." She shook her head, her expression shifting from amusement to cold disdain. "You work in finance, Angelina. You advise people on money all day long, yet you are too cheap to spend a dime on your own mother? Does it hurt you that much to spend actual currency on me?" "It's not about the money," I tried to say. I wanted to give you something that mattered." "It is cheap," she snapped, cutting me off. "It is embarrassing. Look at this." She held up the box, and for a second, I thought she was just showing it to the room. Instead, she brought it down hard against the corner of the granite coffee table. The sound of the wood cracking was sickeningly loud. The box split down the middle, the hinges twisted, the photos spilled out onto the Persian rug like debris from a wreck. I stood frozen, my hands half raised as if to catch it, but it was too late. The room went dead silent. The air was sucked out of the space, leaving a vacuum filled only with Elaine's heavy breathing. "You always do this," she hissed, stepping into my personal space. "You always have to make yourself the victim, the poor little orphan with her handmade trash, making the rest of us look materialistic. You do it to shame me." I didn't. The slap came out of nowhere. It was not a theatrical, open-palm gesture. It was a hard, vicious strike that connected with the force of genuine hatred. My head snapped to the right. My ear rang. I stumbled back, clutching the edge of the sofa to keep from falling. I was 29 years old. I was a professional woman. I paid taxes. I had a degree. And I had just been struck across the face by my stepmother in front of 20 witnesses. I looked up, stunned, my hand flying to my cheek. Elaine stood there, chest heaving, not an ounce of regret on her face. "Don't you dare look at me like that. You are an ungrateful, stingy little brat who loves to make this family look bad." I looked at my father, Mark. He was standing by the fireplace, a glass of scotch in his hand. He looked at me, then at Elaine, then at the floor. He did not step forward. He did not yell. He did not demand an apology. "Angelina," he mumbled, his voice thick with the cowardice I had spent a lifetime making excuses for. "Don't make a scene. You know how she gets when she is stressed. Why did you have to provoke her with that?" He gestured vaguely at the broken wood on the floor. "Provoke her." I looked around the room. My aunts were studying the contents of their wine glasses. My uncles were adjusting their ties, looking at the ceiling. Savannah was smirking behind her hand, pretending to be shocked but failing to hide the gleam of triumph in her eyes. No one moved. No one spoke up. In a room full of people who shared my blood, I was entirely, completely alone. I had turned on my heel and walked straight to the bathroom, locking the door behind me with shaking hands. Now, back in the present, the bag of peas was starting to melt, condensation dripping down my wrist. My phone buzzed in the pocket of my slacks. I pulled it out. It was Logan, my cousin Logan Hale. He was the only one who hadn't been able to make it tonight because of a work conflict. "How is the party? Everyone behaving?" his text read. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the camera icon. I raised the phone and snapped a picture of myself in the mirror. The bruise was undeniable. It was ugly. It was proof. I could send this to him right now. I could type out, "She hit me. She finally hit me." But old habits die hard. The conditioning of 10 years, the rule that we do not air our dirty laundry, that we protect the family image, that we do not cause trouble for Dad, kicked in with the force of a reflex. I deleted the photo. "Fine," I typed. "Tell you later." I shoved the phone back into my pocket and looked at myself one last time. The woman in the mirror looked tired. She looked worn down. But beneath the swelling and the shock, there was something else igniting in her eyes. It was a cold, hard clarity. For 10 years, I had taken the emotional abuse. I had taken the financial manipulation. I had taken the snide comments about my mother, the exclusion from family trips, the burden of the mortgage. I had taken it because I thought that if I just tried hard enough, if I was good enough, if I was generous enough, eventually they would love me. But that slap had clarified everything. This wasn't a family. This was a hostage situation, and I was the one paying the ransom. Elaine didn't hit me because she was stressed. She hit me because she knew she could. She hit me because she had zero respect for me. She hit me because, to her, I was nothing more than a resource to be exploited and a nuisance to be managed. And my father? He had watched. He had blamed me. I tossed the bag of melting peas into the sink. I didn't bother fixing my makeup. I didn't bother checking if the redness was covered. I unlocked the door and stepped out, bypassing the living room entirely. I walked straight down the hallway to my bedroom, the smallest room in the house, the one that used to be a storage closet before they converted Savannah's old room into a guest suite for important visitors. I closed the door and wedged a chair under the handle. It was a childish move, but I didn't care. I dragged my old suitcase out from under the bed. It was dusty. I hadn't used it in 2 years, not since Elaine had guilt-tripped me out of taking a weekend trip with friends because she needed help with a dinner party. I opened it and started packing. I didn't pack clothes. I didn't pack toiletries. I packed the things that mattered: my passport, my birth certificate, the locket my biological mother had given me before she died, my external hard drive, the few pieces of jewelry that I had bought for myself and kept hidden in a hollowed-out book. I moved quietly, mechanically. I could hear the party winding down outside. I heard car doors slamming, engines starting, voices shouting casual goodbyes. Great party. Elaine, happy birthday. They were leaving. They were going home to their safe lives, forgetting the sound of wood cracking and skin slapping skin. I sat on the edge of the bed, the suitcase open at my feet. The house eventually fell silent. I heard Mark and Elaine retreat to the master bedroom upstairs. I heard Savannah giggling on the phone in her room down the hall. My cheek throbbed in time with my heartbeat. I realized then that I wasn't just packing a bag. I was packing a parachute. For a decade, I had been the good daughter. I had been the doormat. I had been the one who fixed things, paid for things, and apologized for existing. I had thought that endurance was a virtue. I thought that taking the high road meant letting them walk all over me. But looking at the bruise reflected in the dark window of my bedroom, I asked myself a question that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. What if I stop? What if this is the last time I walk out of this house as a victim? What if, instead of waking up tomorrow and pretending this didn't happen, I burn the bridge while I'm still standing on it? I zipped the suitcase shut. The sound was like a zipper on a body bag. Final and absolute. I wasn't leaving tonight. That would be impulsive. That would be messy. I needed to be smart. I worked in finance. I knew how to restructure debt. I knew how to salvage assets. I knew how to play the long game. They wanted to treat me like a stranger? Fine. They wanted to treat me like a bank account? Okay. I lay down on top of the covers, fully dressed, my hand resting on the handle of the suitcase. The pain in my face was sharpening, clarifying my thoughts. I let the anger come. I didn't push it down this time. I let it fill me up, cold and heavy and dangerous. Elaine thought she had broken me tonight. She thought she had put me in my place. She had no idea that she had just set me free. To understand why I didn't just pack my bags and leave 5 years ago, you have to understand the geography of my life before the bruise on my cheek. You have to understand that my erasure didn't happen in a single violent explosion. It was a slow erosion, like water wearing down a stone, until there was almost nothing left of the girl I used to be. It started in Maple Falls when I was 14 years old. That was the year my mother died. Her cancer was aggressive, a thief that stole her in months, leaving a silence in our house that felt heavy enough to crush ribs. My father, Mark, didn't handle the grief. He drowned in it. He stopped opening bills. He stopped cooking. He stopped being a father and became a ghost that haunted the living room sofa. I became the adult by necessity. I learned how to balance a checkbook before I learned how to drive. I learned that if I didn't pay the electric bill by the 3rd Friday of the month, the lights went out. I learned to cook cheap, filling meals because Mark often forgot to leave me grocery money. For 3 years, it was just us, surviving in the wreckage. Then came Elaine. I was 17 when Mark brought her home. She was a widow, sharp-edged and gleaming, smelling of expensive vanilla and ambition. She had a daughter, Savannah, who was 10 years old and dressed like a porcelain doll that was never allowed to play in the dirt. The transformation was instantaneous. My aunts and uncles, who had watched Mark wither away, suddenly cheered. They called Elaine his second chance. They called her a savior. They were so relieved to see Mark wearing a clean shirt and smiling again. that they didn't look too closely at the cost. Elaine was a master of subtle separation. It wasn't that she was outwardly cruel. She was just incredibly precise about where I belonged, and it was never inside the circle. It started at the dinner table. "Savannah needs to sit next to Mark to bond," she would say with a tight smile, moving my placemat to the end of the table, near the kitchen door. Then it was the names. She insisted Savannah call Mark Daddy, but she always referred to me as Mark's daughter when talking to neighbors, as if I were an accessory he had acquired prior to the marriage. By the time we moved from Maple Falls to Ridgeview, to accommodate Elaine's preference for a better social climate, I had been quietly demoted from daughter to live-in staff. I remember one Tuesday evening vividly. I was 18, trying to finish a calculus assignment on the kitchen island. The house smelled of rosemary and garlic. I was stirring a pot of soup with one hand and punching numbers into a calculator with the other because Elaine had a migraine and Savannah was too young to handle the stove. Elaine walked in, her heels clicking on the tile like a countdown. She dipped a spoon into the pot, tasted it, and grimaced. "It is bland," she said, dropping the spoon into the sink with a clatter. "Did you even put salt in this? Honestly, Angelina, it is not nuclear physics. It is soup. If you cannot contribute financially, the least you can do is make sure dinner is edible." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I'm sorry. I was focusing on my math homework." "Math isn't going to get the laundry folded," she replied, turning her back to me. "Savannah needs her gym clothes for tomorrow. Go handle that before you fix this mess." 10 minutes later, Mark walked in carrying a sleek, white box. It was a brand new laptop, the top-of-the-line model. Savannah shrieked with delight, tearing into the packaging. "For her online studies," Mark said, beaming at Elaine, who nodded approvingly. "We have to invest in her future." I looked down at my second-hand calculator with the cracked screen. I didn't say a word. I just went to the laundry room and started the cycle, the hum of the machine drowning out their laughter. When I turned 18, the financial shackles began to click into place. Elaine sat us down for a family meeting. She had found a way to refinance the house in Ridgeview, to pull out equity to renovate and invest. She explained, with a voice like honey, that this was for the family's future. "But Mark's credit score took a hit during those bad years," she explained, looking at me with feigned sympathy. "And mine is tied up in the trust for Savannah. We need a third signer, just for the paperwork. Angelina, it builds your credit history. It is a gift, really." I looked at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just nodded and said, "It would really help us out. It is just a signature." I signed. I signed because I wanted them to stop looking at me like a burden. I signed because I thought if I shared the risk, I would share the reward. I didn't know then that I was signing away my freedom. While Savannah got a bedroom painted in lavender with posters covering every inch of the walls and a closet full of clothes she wore once, I took the small room downstairs. I worked shifts at a diner after school. I applied to community college because Elaine said a university was too expensive for the family budget right now. Whenever I tried to push back, whenever I pointed out the disparity between Savannah's new car and my bus pass, Elaine had a rehearsed line. She would look at me with cold, dead eyes and say, "I am not your mother. Angelina, I do not owe you anything. My job is to look after my daughter. Your father does the best he can, but you are an adult. Stop looking for handouts." The only person who seemed to notice the shrinking of my existence was my cousin Logan. Logan was my aunt's son, quiet and observant. He would come over for Sunday barbecues, and while the rest of the family sat on the patio drinking iced tea, he would find me in the kitchen, scraping plates and loading the dishwasher. "You know you are not the maid, right?" he asked me once, leaning against the counter while Savannah sat in the living room, scrolling through social media on her phone. "It is fine," I lied, scrubbing a stubborn stain off a casserole dish. "I like to stay busy." "You look tired." He said, his voice low. "Are you okay?" That question almost broke me. Are you okay? No one had asked me that in years, but I was terrified of causing a scene. of being the problem child Elaine always painted me to be. So I just nodded and said, "I'm fine, Logan, really." The holidays were the worst. Christmas became a spectator sport where I watched Savannah open boxes of designer clothes, electronics, and jewelry. Mark and Elaine would exchange expensive watches or weekend getaway packages. When it came to me, I would unwrap a pack of socks or a generic gift card to a grocery store. Or sometimes, nothing wrapped at all. Just an envelope with a utility bill inside that Elaine would slide over, whispering, "Since you are working now, you can cover the heating this month. It is your contribution." I couldn't afford to buy them expensive things. I could barely afford my textbooks. So I started making things. I taught myself to knit. I learned wood carving from YouTube videos. I thought that if I put hours of labor into a gift, if I poured my time and sweat into it, they would value it more than money. I thought they would see the love. I was wrong. They saw the lack of a price tag and called it cheap. The trap snapped shut permanently when I was 22. I had saved enough from my waitress job to move out. I had found a tiny studio apartment near the community college. I was ready to leave. I packed my boxes and told my father at dinner, "I'm moving out next month." Mark looked panicked. He looked at Elaine. Elaine set down her fork and wiped her mouth delicately. "That is wonderful, Angelina, but there is a small problem." She explained that there was a clause in the refinancing loan, the one I had co-signed at 18. If I moved my primary residence address, the interest rate would triple, or maybe it was that the loan would be called in. She used a lot of banking jargon that I didn't understand at the time, words that sounded terrifying and official. "And," she added, sliding a document across the table, "your father took out a student loan for your last semester, but since his credit is still recovering, he attached it to the house equity. If you leave, the house is at risk. We could lose everything." "I didn't ask for that loan," I protested, my hands shaking. "I paid my own tuition." "We were trying to help," she said smoothly, "to give you a cushion. Now, you are going to abandon us and put your father on the street?" Mark looked at me, his eyes watery and pleading. "Please, just stay a little longer, until we sort this out. The house. It is your investment too. It is for your benefit in the long run." I looked at the paperwork. I saw my name. I saw the debt. I saw the guilt on my father's face, weaponized by the woman sitting next to him. I unpacked my boxes that night. I stayed. I took on extra shifts to help pay the household interest, believing that I was saving my family from ruin. I didn't know that the loan documents were manipulated. I didn't know that I was paying for Savannah's private college tuition, not my own cushion. I just knew that I was trapped, a prisoner in a house where I paid the mortgage but wasn't allowed to sit at the head of the table. I became a ghost in my own life, fading into the beige walls, waiting for a breaking point I didn't know was coming until the back of Elaine's hand connected with my face. The morning sun hitting the glass facade of the Summit Line Advisory Building was blinding, a stark, clinical white light that felt like an interrogation lamp. I adjusted my sunglasses and kept my head down as I pushed through the revolving doors. To the rest of the world, I was just another analyst in a navy blazer, rushing to beat the 9 o'clock login time. I was the woman who handled the difficult portfolios, the one who quietly untangled knotted financial disasters for mid-sized family businesses. But under the layer of heavy, industrial-strength concealer and the disposable medical mask I wore, claiming a sudden onset of a summer cold, my cheek was throbbing with a dull, rhythmic heat. Every step I took sent a tiny shockwave of pain radiating from my jawbone to my temple. I took the elevator to the 14th floor, surrounded by the scent of expensive coffee and ambition. My colleagues were talking about weekend golf trips and new bistro openings. I stood in the corner, staring at the floor numbers changing, trying to make myself as small as possible. The irony was suffocating. I spent 40 hours a week saving strangers from financial ruin. I was an expert at identifying toxic assets, restructuring bad debt, and spotting leakage in a budget. Yet, I was going home every night to a house where I was the toxic asset being liquidated by my own family. I sat at my desk, the dual monitors flickering to life, My inbox was already full. Urgent. Client needs restructuring plan. Review required. Henderson bankruptcy filing. I opened a spreadsheet, the familiar grid of numbers usually calming my brain. But today, the numbers blurred. All I could hear was the echo of Elaine's laughter from the night before. It wasn't just the slap. The slap was physical. It was the laughter that had broken something inside my chest. It was the sound of complete, utter dismissal. To them, I wasn't a person. I was an appliance that had malfunctioned. I worked mechanically until noon. I answered emails. I ran risk assessments. I was a ghost in the machine, efficient and invisible. At 12:30, my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a video call request from Logan. I hesitated. I looked around the open plan office. Most people were out for lunch. I grabbed my phone and ducked into one of the small, soundproof Focus Pods Summit line provided for private client calls. I locked the glass door and accepted the call. Logan's face filled the screen. He was sitting in his car, likely on his break from the law office. He looked tired, his hair messy, but his eyes were sharp, scanning my face instantly. "Take off the mask, Angelina," he said. No greeting, no small talk. "I can't," I whispered, glancing at the glass wall of the pod. "I am at work, Logan. People will see." "You are in a private booth. Take it off. I need to see it." His voice was hard, lacking its usual playful cadence. I sighed, my fingers trembling as I looped the elastic from behind my ears. I lowered the mask. I saw him flinch. It was a micro-reaction, a tightening of the jaw, a flare of the nostrils. The concealer I had applied was good, but the swelling was undeniable. The bruise had blossomed overnight into a dark, angry purple that distorted the line of my cheekbone. "God," he breathed out, looking away for a second before fixing his gaze back on me. "She actually did it. I didn't want to believe the text." "It looks worse than it feels." I lied. It hurt like hell. "Stop," Logan snapped. "Stop minimizing it. Stop protecting them. She assaulted you. In front of 20 people. "And Dad did nothing," I added, the words tasting like ash. "He just stood there. He told me not to make a scene." Logan leaned back in his car seat, rubbing his face with his hands. "I have to tell you something, and I need you to listen without making excuses for them. Can you do that?" I nodded, leaning in closer to the phone. "What is it?" "Do you remember 4 years ago? The 4th of July barbecue at Aunt Clara's house? You were inside washing dishes, as usual." "I remember," I said. "It was blistering hot that day." "I went out to the back porch to get a beer," Logan continued. "Elaine was there with her sister. They didn't see me. Elaine was complaining about the cost of Savannah's tuition for that private art school. Her sister asked how they could afford it with Mark's business struggling, and Elaine laughed. She said, and I'm quoting this exactly because I wrote it down that night, 'Oh, don't worry. I have a spare wallet. Angelina's credit score is pristine, and the girl is too desperate for approval to read the fine print. As long as I keep her guilty, she will sign anything.'" The air in the small booth suddenly felt very thin. "She called me a spare wallet?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "She called you a resource. I tried to tell you back then. I tried to hint at it, but you shut me down. You said I was being dramatic, that they were family and they needed help." I closed my eyes. I remembered that time. I remembered Logan asking me why I was co-signing a car loan for Savannah, and I had snapped at him, defending Elaine, desperate to believe that my sacrifice was an act of love, not a transaction. "It is different now," I said, opening my eyes. "I am listening." "Check the records," Logan commanded. "You are at a financial firm. You have access to the credit bureaus, the property deeds, everything. Don't look at the sanitized PDF summaries your dad hands you once a year. Look at the raw data. Look at it right now while I'm on the line." My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I turned my chair toward my laptop. I had access to these databases for client verification. It was technically a breach of company policy to look up family members without cause, but looking up myself? That was a gray area I was willing to sprint through. I logged into the county recorder's database first. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Larson. Mark. Larson. Angelina. The deed to the house in Ridgeview popped up. I squinted at the screen, scrolling down to the ownership structure. "What do you see?" Logan asked. "The house," I said slowly, trying to process the legal jargon. "It is titled as joint tenancy with rights of survivorship between Mark Larson and me. And Elaine? She is not on the title," I said, a wave of confusion washing over me. "Wait, she is listed as a borrower on the mortgage note, but she is not on the deed. Why would she pay a mortgage for a house she doesn't own?" "Keep looking," Logan urged. "Look at the debt load." I switched tabs to the credit bureau. I pulled my full credit report, the one that showed every single active trade line, every inquiry, every liability attached to my Social Security number. The list was long, too long. There was the primary mortgage, $450,000. There was a home equity line of credit, $80,000, almost maxed out. There were student loans, $40,000, my own. And then, near the bottom, there was something else. "Logan," I said, my voice shaking, "there is a personal unsecured loan from a private lender, $75,000, opened 2 years ago. Did you sign for that?" "No," I said instantly. "No way. I haven't taken out a loan in 5 years except for my car, and I paid that off. I don't even know who this lender is." I clicked on the details. The loan was originating from a branch in Ridgeview. The contact email on the file was M. Larson, family at email, provider, an address my father used. But the primary obligor was Angelina Larson. "She forged it," I whispered. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, harder than the slap. "Or she made Dad bring her the papers and she traced my signature. They took out $75,000 in my name. Logan, where did that money go?" "Savannah's semester abroad in Italy?" Logan suggested, his voice dripping with ice. "Or maybe Elaine's new SUV? It doesn't matter where it went. What matters is that it is fraud." I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. The numbers swam before my eyes. All this time, I thought I was helping. I thought I was the dutiful daughter chipping in for groceries and electricity. In reality, I was the host organism. They were bleeding me dry. They were leveraging my future to fund their present. If I tried to leave, if I tried to buy my own home one day, this debt would anchor me to the ground. I would never be approved for anything. I was drowning in their luxury. "They own me," I said, feeling the panic rising in my throat. "The house, the loans. If I stop paying, my credit is ruined. If I leave, they default, and the bank comes after me. I am trapped." "No," Logan said firmly. "You are not trapped. You are the weapon." I looked back at the phone. "What?" "Look at the deed again. Ang, you and Mark are joint tenants. Elaine is not on the title. Do you know what that means?" "It means I own half the house." "It means you have leverage," Logan corrected. "And that forged loan? That is a nuclear bomb. If you report that as identity theft, the lender launches an investigation. They freeze the accounts. It triggers a criminal inquiry." "If I do that, Dad goes to jail," I said, my stomach twisting. "Maybe," Logan said, and his lack of hesitation shocked me. "Or maybe he finally has to face the monster he married. Look, Angelina, you have a choice. You can go back to that house tonight, put some ice on your face, and pretend you didn't see this. You can pay off that $75,000 loan for the next 10 years while Savannah laughs at your handmade gifts. Or—" He leaned into the camera, his eyes burning with intensity. "Or you let me help you. I have been working with a senior partner at my firm who specializes in financial abuse. We can build a case. We can untangle you. But it won't be pretty. You have to be willing to burn it down. You have to be willing to watch them panic." I looked at the freeze frame of my bruised face in the corner of the video call. I looked at the spreadsheet showing $75,000 of stolen freedom. I thought about the scarf I had knitted, the hours I had spent sanding that wood, thinking about how to make Elaine smile. I was done making people smile. I don't want to just leave, I said, my voice steadying, finding a new, lower register. I want my name back, I want my money back, and I want them to hurt the way my face hurts right now. Logan nodded slowly. A grim smile touched his lips. Good, he said. Then wipe your tears, put your mask back on, and go finish your workday. Tonight, we don't cry. Tonight, we start planning the audit from hell. I hung up the phone. I sat in the silence of the booth for a long minute. I touched the bruise one last time, but not with shame. I touched it like a reminder. I stood up, smoothed down my blazer, and walked back out into the bright, cold office. I sat down at my desk and opened a new folder on my personal drive. I named it Project Exit, and then, with the ruthless efficiency of a seasoned financial analyst, I began to download everything. The glow of the computer screen in the Summit Line office seemed to blur as I let myself drift back. I needed to remember, not just the sharp, stinging conclusion of the night that had sent me hiding in the bathroom, but the entire, agonizing sequence that led to it. I needed to replay the footage in my mind, frame by frame, to understand exactly when the final thread of my loyalty had snapped. It was the night of Elaine's 50th birthday. The house in Ridgeview, the house that legally belonged to me and my father, though no guest there knew it, was lit up like a beacon. Every window was glowing. We had hired a catering crew that cost more than my first car, and the air was thick with the smell of rosemary-crusted lamb and expensive red wine. I remembered standing by the entrance to the living room, smoothing the skirt of my dress. It was a simple navy dress, one I had bought on sale, and I felt invisible in it. Around me, my relatives were mingling. I saw my Uncle Bob admiring the crown molding. Mark really outdid himself with this place, he said to my Aunt Sarah. Elaine has such a wonderful eye for design. They have built a real palace here. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that the palace was paid for by the girl standing in the corner holding a tray of empty champagne flutes. But I didn't. I just smiled, the dutiful stepdaughter, and waited for the gift-giving ceremony to begin. It started with Savannah. Of course, it started with Savannah. She walked into the center of the room, looking every bit the golden child in a shimmering cocktail dress. She held a bright orange shopping bag, the brand unmistakable even from across the room. A hush fell over the party. The guests leaned in, anticipating the reveal. "Happy birthday, Mommy," Savannah said, her voice pitching up into that sweet, performative tone she reserved for audiences. "I know how hard you work for us. You deserve the world." Elaine sat on the velvet armchair like a queen on a throne. She took the bag, her eyes widening. She pulled out the box, then the dust bag, and finally, the purse. It was a structured leather handbag, the kind that required a wait list or a very aggressive personal shopper. "Oh, my God," Elaine gasped, pressing the leather to her cheek. Tears, actual tears, welled up in her eyes. "Savannah, baby, this is too much. It is perfection." The room erupted in applause. "She knows her mother's taste," someone shouted. Elaine hugged Savannah, pulling her tight, over her daughter's shoulder. She looked at the room and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "My daughter always knows that I deserve the best. She understands quality." My stomach tightened. I looked down at the gift in my own hands. It wasn't in a bright orange designer bag. It was wrapped in brown craft paper, tied with twine and a sprig of dried lavender. It looked rustic. It looked sincere. Suddenly, it looked pathetic. I waited until the applause for Savannah died down. The room was buzzing with high energy, the guests refilling their glasses. "Angelina," my father said, gesturing for me to come forward. "Do you have something for Elaine?" I stepped into the circle. The floor felt unsteady beneath my heels. I could feel 40 pairs of eyes on me. I handed the package to Elaine. "Happy birthday," I said. My voice sounded small in the cavernous room. "I made this for you." Elaine took it. The weight of the wood inside surprised her. She raised an eyebrow, glancing at the craft paper. "You made it?" she repeated. The warmth that had been in her voice for Savannah was gone, replaced by a cool, detached curiosity. She tore the paper. I held my breath. I had spent 6 weekends carving that box. I had selected the walnut wood because the grain reminded me of the antique furniture Elaine claimed to love. Inside, I had placed the photos, not the staged family portraits we took for Christmas cards where I was always standing on the edge, but candid shots. There was one of us at the lake, years ago, where Elaine was actually laughing at a joke I made. There was one of Mark and her dancing, and underneath the photos was the letter. I had written 3 drafts of that letter. In it, I had swallowed my pride. I had written, "I know we got off to a rocky start, and I know I am not the daughter you envisioned, but I want to be part of this family. I want to be close to you." Elaine lifted the lid. She looked at the scarf I had knitted, the deep emerald wool coiled neatly inside. She picked up the stack of photos. She unfolded the letter, scanned the first few lines, and then stopped. The silence in the room stretched out, thin and brittle. Then, Elaine laughed. It wasn't a joyful laugh. It was a bark of incredulity. She looked up at me, her eyes dancing with mockery. "Is this a joke?" she asked. "No," I said, confusion washing over me. "It is a memory box. I thought—" "A memory box?" she interrupted, her voice rising so that even the people in the back near the bar could hear. "Angelina, I turned 50 today. 50. And you give me a box of scrap wood and some old Polaroids?" She reached into the box and pulled out the scarf. She held it up by one corner. "And this? Did you make this too? It looks like something a grandmother would knit for a charity drive. It is full of dropped stitches." "It is cashmere," I said, my face burning. "I spent weeks on it." "Weeks?" Elaine scoffed. She dropped the scarf back into the box with a look of distaste. "You are a 29-year-old woman, Angelina. You work at a financial firm in the city. You handle millions of dollars. And yet, when it comes to your own family, you cannot bring yourself to spend actual money? Savannah is a student, and she bought me Italian leather. You have a salary, and you bring me arts and crafts?" I wanted it to mean something, I stammered, feeling the tears pricking my eyes. I thought a handmade gift was more personal than just buying something from a store. "It is not personal," Elaine snapped. "It is cheap. It is you being stingy, just like you always are. You hoard your money, acting like we are going to rob you, and then you try to pass off this garbage as sentimental." "That is not true," I said, my voice shaking. "I pay the mortgage. I pay the bills. I just wanted to give you something from the heart." The mention of the mortgage was a mistake. I saw the flash of rage in Elaine's eyes. I had broken the unwritten rule. Never mention who actually pays for the lifestyle. She stood up. The movement was so abrupt that the guests nearest to her took a step back. "You ungrateful little brat," she hissed. She lifted the wooden box, the box I had sanded until my fingers bled, the box I had oiled and polished, and she slammed it onto the coffee table. The sound was terrible. It was the sound of destruction. The walnut wood, which I had thought was so strong, shattered against the marble surface. The lid splintered. The photos flew out, scattering across the Persian rug like confetti. The letter, my plea for love, fluttered down and landed near her shoe. "Elaine!" someone gasped from the crowd. But she wasn't done. She stepped over the broken wood, closing the distance between us. I could smell her perfume, a heavy, cloying scent of jasmine and musk that suddenly made me nauseous. I saw the veins throbbing in her neck. "You think you are so special?" she screamed, her face inches from mine. "You think because you pay a few bills you can humiliate me with this trash? I fed you for 10 years. I raised you when your own mother couldn't. And this is how you repay me? By making me look like a charity case in front of my friends?" "I didn't—" The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. Crack! It was louder than the wood breaking. It was a wet, meaty sound of palm against flesh. My head whipped to the side. The pain was immediate and blinding. A white-hot explosion on my left cheek. I stumbled back. my hand flying to my face, my eyes wide with shock. The room went dead silent. The music seemed to stop. The clinking of glasses ceased. I stood there, trembling, waiting for someone to move, waiting for someone to shout, waiting for my father. I looked at Mark. He was standing right there, holding his Scotch glass. He looked at me. Then he looked at the guests who were staring with open mouths. His face turned red, not with anger at his wife, but with embarrassment. "Angelina," he muttered, his voice weak and pleading. "Don't make a scene. Just go downstairs. You know how she gets. Why did you have to provoke her?" Provoke her! The words hit me harder than the hand. I looked around the room. My Aunt Sarah was looking at her shoes. My Uncle Bob was suddenly very interested in his drink. Savannah was standing behind her mother, looking vindicated, as if justice had been served. They were all looking away. They were all pretending that a grown woman hadn't just been assaulted in her own living room. They were choosing the path of least resistance. They were choosing the predator because she was louder, because she was scarier, because she controlled the narrative. I backed away. My heel crunched on a piece of the shattered wood. I looked down and saw the photo of me and Elaine at the lake. The glass of the frame cracked right through my smiling face. I turned and ran. I didn't walk. I ran to the bathroom, the sound of my own heartbeat deafening in my ears. But what I didn't know then, what I only found out later from Logan, was that the room wasn't entirely blind. Cousin Kyle, a distant relative on my mother's side who was obsessed with social media, had been recording the gift opening for his Instagram story. He had wanted to capture the wholesome family moments. He had captured everything. He had captured the look of disdain on Elaine's face. He had captured the sound of the box shattering. He had captured the slap, clear and high definition. And he had captured Mark's cowardly silence. Elaine had seen him holding the phone immediately after she hit me. She had marched over to him, her voice suddenly composed, terrifyingly calm. "Delete that, Kyle, right now. We don't air private family disputes." Kyle, terrified, had deleted it. But Logan, who wasn't even at the party, was part of a group chat where Kyle had auto-uploaded his drafts. Logan had seen it populate in the cloud before Kyle could scrub it. Logan had saved it. Back in the kitchen, hours later, after the guests had left and I had packed my suitcase, I crept out to the living room. The lights were off. The house smelled of stale wine and extinguished candles. I knelt on the rug. My cheek was throbbing, a constant, rhythmic reminder of my place in this hierarchy. I began to pick up the pieces of the box. I picked up the splintered lid. I picked up the emerald scarf, now covered in dust from the floor. I picked up the letter. I didn't read it again. I crumpled it into a tight ball in my fist. I gathered the photos, the happy family that never existed. I realized then that the box was a metaphor I had been too blind to see. I had built a beautiful container for a fantasy. I had tried to house our relationship in something sturdy and crafted with love, but Elaine had shown me the truth. The relationship wasn't the wood. The relationship was the hammer. I swept the shards of wood into a dustpan. The noise was harsh in the silent house. As I dumped the wreckage of my efforts into the trash can, I felt a shift in my chest. The heavy, suffocating blanket of sadness was lifting, replaced by a cold, steel spine of resolve. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I wasn't a stepchild. I wasn't a victim. I was a creditor, and they were in default. I looked at the trash can one last time. "Happy birthday, Elaine," I whispered to the darkness. "I hope you enjoyed the show, because it is going to cost you everything." The coffee shop was called The Gavel, a small, brick-walled establishment tucked into the shadow of the county courthouse. It smelled of burnt espresso and legal anxiety. I sat in a booth at the back, wearing sunglasses to hide the purple-yellow stain on my cheek. My hands wrapped around a paper cup that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Logan walked in at 2 o'clock sharp. He looked different here than he did at family barbecues. He wasn't wearing his usual faded hoodie. He was in a crisp, button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up, carrying a leather messenger bag that looked beaten but expensive. He didn't look like my little cousin anymore. He looked like a man who knew where the bodies were buried. He slid into the booth opposite me and didn't waste time with pleasantries. He unzipped his bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. "I pulled everything I could find on public record," he said, his voice low but steady. "And I had you print out the internal bank documents. Let's look at the autopsy." We spread the papers across the small table, pushing aside sugar packets and napkins. It was a gruesome mosaic of my life, translated into numbers and legal clauses. There was the mortgage deed from 10 years ago, the student loan consolidation from 5 years ago, the mysterious personal loan from 2 years ago. "Look at this," Logan said, tapping his finger on the signature line of the personal loan, the $75,000 anchor I hadn't known I was dragging. I leaned in. The signature read, Angelina Larson. It had the right slant. It had the right loop on the L. But when I looked closer, my stomach turned over. "The dot on the I," I whispered. "I draw a circle. I have done it since high school. This is just a dot." "And look at the pressure points," Logan added, pulling a pen from his pocket to point without touching the paper. "See how the ink pools at the start of the A? That is hesitation. That is someone stopping to think about how the letter should look. When you sign your name, it is muscle memory. It flows. This is a drawing of your signature, not the signature itself." I felt a cold sweat prickle down my back. "Elaine." "It fits her pattern," Logan said. He sat back, crossing his arms. "I work with cases like this all day. We call it coerced debt or financial abuse. It is a specific kind of domestic violence. It doesn't always leave bruises, though in your case, it clearly did. But it cripples the victim just as effectively. They use the concept of family duty to weaponize your credit score." I can't believe I didn't see it," I stammered. "I analyze risk for a living." "That is why she got away with it," Logan said gently. "Because you are smart. But you are also conditioned. You were trained to believe that saying no to them was an act of betrayal. You are not just a victim of bad parenting, Angelina. You are a victim of a crime." The word crime hung in the air between us, heavy and ugly. "But it is Dad," I said, the old reflex kicking in. "If I report this, if I say the signature is fake, Mark is the cosigner. He will be implicated." Logan looked at me with a mixture of pity and steel. "Mark is an accomplice, yes, but look at the beneficiary accounts." He flipped a page to a bank transfer record I had downloaded that morning. The loan proceeds didn't go into a joint account. They went into a holding trust controlled by E.M. Larson, Elaine Marie Larson. "So Dad signed it, but she took the money," I reasoned. "Exactly. If we play this right, we can paint Mark as another victim of her manipulation. Weak, negligent, sure. But Elaine? She is the architect. The law can distinguish between the puppet and the puppeteer, but only if you give them the scissors to cut the strings." He pulled a legal pad from his bag and clicked his pen. "We need a war chest. We are going to build a file so thick that when we drop it on a judge's desk, it cracks the wood." We spent the next hour building the checklist. It was methodical, cold, and incredibly grounding. Item 1. The audit. I needed to download 5 years of bank statements from every account my name touched. Item 2. The communications. Logan told me to search my emails and texts for keywords like, "sign this," "help us out," "trust me," or "emergency." We needed to prove a pattern of coercion. Item 3. The evidence of violence. I showed him the photo of my face I had taken in the bathroom mirror. He nodded grimly and told me to upload it to a secure cloud server he had set up, along with a time-stamped diary entry describing the assault. Item 4. The witness. "I have the video," Logan said. "The one Kyle took. It shows the slap. It shows the aggression. That video is the golden ticket. It proves that the physical environment in that house is unsafe, which adds weight to the financial coercion claims." When we left the coffee shop, the sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows across the pavement. My next stop was a bank. Not the one my family used, and not the one where my father had friends. I walked into a large national chain 3 blocks away. I sat at the new accounts desk across from a young woman who looked bored. She asked for my ID and minimum deposit. $200, I said, handing over the cash I had withdrawn earlier. And the purpose of the account? She asked, typing away. Personal savings, I said. It was the first time in 10 years I had opened an account that Elaine didn't know about. I set up direct deposit on my phone right there in the chair. Rerouting 60% of my salary to this new, secret vault. The moment the confirmation screen flashed success, I felt a physical weight lift off my chest. For the first time, my labor was going to pay for my freedom, not my cage. From the bank, Logan drove me to a brownstone building on the edge of the historic district. The brass plaque by the door read, Stonebridge and Hale. Hale? I asked, looking at Logan. My uncle, he said with a grin. Not the one you know, the one the family doesn't talk about because he sues people for a living. We met with Mr. Stonebridge in a library that smelled of mahogany and pipe tobacco. He was a man in his 60s with eyebrows like wire brushes and eyes that didn't blink enough. He read through the file Logan and I had engaged in organizing. He looked at the forged signature. He looked at the deed. He looked at the photo of my face. He took off his reading glasses and cleaned them slowly with a handkerchief. Young lady, Mr. Stonebridge said, his voice gravelly, if half of this holds up in discovery, your stepmother has a significant problem. This isn't just a civil dispute over who pays the electric bill. This is grand larceny. This is identity theft. This is fraud. I just want out, I said, my hands gripping the armrests of the leather chair. I want my name off the house, and I want that $75,000 debt gone. We can do that, Stonebridge said. But you have to listen to me. The instinct when you find out you have been robbed is to scream. You want to run home and throw these papers in her face. You want to demand justice. Yes, I admitted. I do. Do not do that, he commanded. He leaned forward. If you confront her now, she shreds documents. She hides assets. She manipulates your father into signing affidavits saying you authorized everything verbally. She circles the wagons. So what do I do? You go back to that house, Stonebridge said. You put ice on your cheek. You apologize for ruining the birthday party. You cook dinner. You play the role of the beaten-down dog that she thinks you are. You let her believe she has won. And while she is comfortable, you bring me everything, every scrap of paper, every voicemail. You let us build the trap around her feet, and we do not pull the rope until she cannot step out of it. I looked at Logan. He nodded. Can you do it? Logan asked. Can you go back there and pretend? I thought about the years of practice I had. I thought about the smile I plastered on my face when Elaine insulted my mother. I thought about the silence I swallowed when Savannah got the things I worked for. I was an expert at pretending. I was a virtuoso of repression. I can do it, I said. I work in restructuring. I know how to manage a failing asset until it is time to liquidate. Stonebridge smiled, a terrifying expression that showed too many teeth. Excellent. We will draft a petition for partition of the property, forcing a sale of the house. We will prepare a fraud affidavit for the loan, but we wait for your signal. Walking out of that office, the air felt sharper, cleaner. I touched the phone in my pocket. It wasn't just a phone anymore. It was a recording device. My laptop wasn't just a work tool. It was an evidence locker. I wasn't walking back into that house as a daughter seeking approval. I was walking in as a spy behind enemy lines. Elaine thought she had broken me with a slap and a broken box. She didn't realize that by shattering the illusion of family, she had handed me the jagged shards. And now, I knew exactly where to aim them. The weeks that followed my visit to Stonebridge and Hale were a masterclass in performance art. I returned to the house in Ridgeview not as the prodigal daughter, but as the chastised one. I walked through the front door with my head lowered, my voice soft, and my hands ready to serve. I am sorry about the party, I told Elaine the next morning, standing in the kitchen doorway while she drank her kale smoothie. I didn't mean to embarrass you. I wasn't thinking. Elaine looked me up and down, searching for any sign of rebellion. Finding none, she smirked. It was a terrifying expression, one of absolute satisfaction. "Well," she said, wiping her mouth with a napkin, "at least you are finally admitting it. I suppose we can move past it, provided you change your attitude. We are a family. Angelina, we forgive, even when it is difficult." "Thank you," I said. "Thank you, Mom." The word tasted like vinegar in my mouth, but it worked like a charm. Elaine's posture relaxed. She practically purred. She believed that the slap had been a necessary correction, a hard reset that had put me back in my place. She thought she had broken my spirit. She had no idea she was talking to a ghost who was currently recording the timestamp of our conversation on a mental ledger. Life fell into a rhythm that was superficially identical to the last 10 years, but fundamentally different in its undercurrents. I still cooked dinner, I still folded the laundry, but now, every time I walked past the home office, I slipped in to scan a document. Every time Elaine left her purse unattended, I checked for receipts. I was building a digital fortress on an encrypted cloud server, brick by damning brick. Elaine, emboldened by my apparent submission, stopped whispering about her plans. She started broadcasting them. 2 weeks after the birthday incident, during a Sunday roast, Elaine dropped the next bomb. Savannah was dating a boy named Trent, a junior associate at a law firm, not Logan's firm. Thankfully, they had been dating for 6 months, but in Elaine's mind, the wedding was already planned. "We need to start thinking about the venue," Elaine announced, spooning potatoes onto Savannah's plate. "The country club is nice, but I was thinking a destination wedding, maybe Cabo or Tuscany." "That sounds expensive," Mark mumbled into his wine glass. "Quality costs money, Mark," Elaine shot back. Then she turned her predatory gaze on me. "But we have assets. I was talking to that mortgage broker, the one who helped us with the renovations. He said the property value in Ridgeview has skyrocketed. We have a lot of equity sitting in this house doing nothing." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept cutting my meat. "Equity?" I asked innocently. "Exactly," Elaine said, beaming. "We can take out a second lien, a bridge loan, just to cover the wedding and perhaps a down payment on a starter home for Savannah and Trent. It is an investment in her future." She reached across the table and patted my hand. Her skin was cold. "And since you are already on the title, Angelina, it would just be a quick signature. You would do that for your sister, wouldn't you? After all the trouble you caused at my birthday?" I looked at Savannah, who was busy texting under the table, not even pretending to care about the finances that would fund her fairy tale. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Whatever Savannah needs, we want her to be happy." Elaine clapped her hands together. "See? I told you she understood. Mark, Angelina knows her role." Under the table, my hand was clenched so tight my nails were digging into my palm. Bridge loan. She wanted to leverage the roof over my head to pay for a party for a girl who had never worked a day in her life. It was parasitic. It was delusional. And if I hadn't met with Mr. Stonebridge, I might have actually signed it out of guilt. But I wasn't signing anything. I was stalling. "Just let me know when the papers are ready," I said. "I will need to review them, just to check the rates." "Oh, don't worry about the boring stuff." Elaine waved a hand. "I will handle the details." A few nights later, the facade cracked, but not from my end. It came from Mark. It was late, past 11 o'clock. I had gone down to the kitchen to get water and saw the sliding glass door to the backyard open. My father was sitting on the patio furniture in the dark, a half-empty bottle of scotch on the table beside him. I hesitated, then stepped out. The air was cool, filled with the sound of crickets. "Dad?" He jumped, nearly knocking over the bottle. "Angie, I didn't hear you." I sat down on the chair opposite him. He looked terrible. His face was gray, the lines around his eyes deep grooves of exhaustion. He looked like a man who was carrying a weight he could no longer lift. "I can't sleep," he admitted, his voice slurring slightly. "Too much thinking." "About the loan?" I asked softly. He sighed, a long, rattling sound. About everything, about you, he looked at me, his eyes swimming with a mixture of shame and fear. I know, Aang, I know she takes your money. I know she pushed for that $75,000 loan 2 years ago. I know you didn't sign it. My breath hitched. I reached into the pocket of my robe and silently tapped the record icon on my phone screen. You knew? I asked, keeping my voice level. I didn't want to know, Mark corrected, staring at his hands. She brought the papers. She said she handled it. I recognized the signature wasn't yours. But, God, Aang, if I say no to her, it is like living in a war zone. She screams. She freezes me out. She threatens to leave and take half of everything. I am a weak man. I know that. A failed man. So you let her steal my identity because you didn't want an argument? I thought I could pay it back, he whispered. Before you noticed, but the business, it just never recovered. He took a swig of scotch. The worst part is the house. Do you know why she needs you to sign everything? Why she can't just take the house from you? Because I am on the deed, I said. No, Mark shook his head. Because of your grandmother, my mother. I frowned. What do you mean? When Mom passed, Mark said, leaning in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, she left the money for this house specifically to you, in a trust, to be accessed when you turned 18 to buy property. She didn't trust Elaine. She told me, Mark, that woman will pick you clean. So she stipulated in the will that any property bought with her inheritance must have Angelina Larson on the title as a primary owner, or the funds would revert to a locked charity trust. I stared at him. The world tilted on its axis. So, this house, I said slowly, it wasn't bought with your savings? It was bought with Grandma's money? My money? 80% of the down payment came from your trust, Mark confessed. Elaine knows. That is why she keeps saying the house is yours, so the debt is yours. She twisted your grandmother's protection into a shackle. She makes you feel like you owe us for living here. But the truth is, we are living in your house, Aang. I felt a surge of rage so pure it nearly choked me. For 10 years. Elaine had acted like she was doing me a favor by letting me sleep in the guest room. She had called me a burden. She had charged me rent in the form of utility bills. And all along, I was the landlord. She was the squatter. Does Elaine know that you are telling me this? I asked. God. No, Mark said, his eyes widening in terror. She would kill me. She thinks you are stupid. Aang, she thinks you don't read the old paperwork. Please, don't say anything. Just try to keep the peace. For me. I looked at this man, my father, who would sell his daughter's future to buy a quiet evening. I felt the last lingering thread of attachment to him snap. He wasn't a victim. He was a collaborator. I won't say anything, Dad, I said, standing up. Go to sleep. I walked back into the house, my hand clutching the phone in my pocket like a grenade. I had the confession. I had the origin of the funds. I had the proof that the house was legally, morally, and financially mine. The next day, on my lunch break, I went to view a studio apartment on the other side of town. It was tiny, basically a closet with a window, and it smelled faintly of cat litter, but it had a lock. It had a lease that would be in my name only. I will take it, I told the landlord, handing him a cashier's check from my new secret bank account. I didn't move in, not yet. I just put a few boxes of books and winter clothes in the closet there. I needed to keep up appearances at the Ridgeview house for a little longer. Mr. Stonebridge needed 2 more weeks to finalize the partition petition and the fraud filings. I returned to the house that evening to find Logan sitting at the dining table. He had dropped by with a pie, claiming he was in the neighborhood. Elaine was charming him, pouring him iced tea and talking about the weather. Savannah was ignoring him. I busied myself setting the table. Logan watched me. He watched how Elaine snapped her fingers when she wanted the salt. He watched how Savannah kicked her shoes off in the middle of the walkway, expecting me to move them. He watched the way I navigated the space, head down, anticipating their needs before they voiced them. After dinner, While I was loading the dishwasher, Logan came into the kitchen with his plate. "You are good at this," he murmured, leaning against the counter so his back was to the living room. "Too good. It is scary." "I am surviving," I whispered, scrubbing a pot. "Did you get the file I uploaded last night? The recording with Mark?" "I listened to it this morning," Logan said. His eyes were dark. "It is everything. The inheritance clause changes the entire legal landscape. It moves this from joint dispute to fiduciary breach. Stonebridge is practically dancing." "Good." But watching them tonight, Logan lowered his voice even further. "Elaine doesn't just control the money. She controls the reality. Did you notice? She speaks in commands disguised as questions. 'You will sign for your sister, won't you? You are happy to help, aren't you?' She boxes you in linguistically before you can even take a breath." "I know," I said. "I have lived with it for a decade." "Well," Logan said, straightening up as Elaine walked toward the kitchen, "the script is about to flip. Just hold on a little longer. The engagement party is in 3 days. Stonebridge wants to serve the papers then." "The party?" I asked. "Here?" "Elaine wants to show off the house again," Logan said with a grim smile. "It is the perfect stage. All the witnesses will be back, the same people who watched you get slapped." I looked at the drying rack, at the reflection of the kitchen in the dark window. "Perfect," I said. "Let them come. I want an audience." Elaine breezed into the kitchen, placing a hand on my shoulder. I flinched internally but stayed still. "Angelina, honey," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness, "make sure you scrub those pots properly. We don't want spots on the cookware when the guests arrive this weekend. It reflects poorly on the family." "I will." "Mom," I said, "I will make sure everything is spotless." I watched her walk away, confident in her dominion. She thought she was planning a party. She didn't know she was planning her own deposition. The house in Ridgeview had been transformed into a set for a high-stakes drama, and Elaine was the director, producer, and lead actress. For Savannah's engagement party, she had spared no expense, or rather, she had spared none of the equity she assumed she could pull from the property. The driveway was lined with rented valet stands. The front lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. Inside, the air smelled of expensive stargazer lilies and the heavy buttery scent of lobster puff pastries. I had initially planned to be anywhere but here. The idea of watching Savannah preen while Elaine took credit for another milestone funded by my credit score made my stomach turn. But Mr. Stonebridge, my attorney, had been adamant. "You need to be there, Angelina," he had said, his voice crackling over the phone 3 days ago. "We filed the motion for the injunction and the fraud investigation yesterday. The court has granted a temporary freeze on the asset. The process server is scheduled to arrive during the party. We need you there to witness the fallout. We need the family to see it happen in real time." So, I stood in the foyer, watching the guests stream in. I wasn't wearing the beige, shapeless clothes Elaine usually picked out for me. I was wearing a dress I had sewn myself over the last 3 nights in my secret studio. It was a deep charcoal linen, structured and sharp, with a neckline that showed off the fact that I wasn't hiding anymore. I had covered the fading yellow bruise on my cheek, but I didn't smile. I stood with my back straight, a glass of sparkling water in my hand, observing the room like a spy. Elaine had invited everyone. The entire extended family was there, including the aunts and uncles who had watched her slap me weeks ago and done nothing. She had also invited the local pastor, Reverend Miller, to bless the union, and a man in a shiny gray suit named Mr. Henderson. I recognized Henderson. He was a mortgage broker, known in town for pushing through high-risk loans. Elaine had paraded him around the room earlier, introducing him as the man who was making dreams come true. "Angelina," Elaine's voice cut through the ambient jazz music. She swept over to me, wearing a champagne-colored gown that cost more than my first year of college tuition. Her eyes flicked over my dress, registering a moment of confusion before she masked it with a tight smile. "I didn't think you were coming. You have been so distant lately." "I wouldn't miss it," I said, my voice cool. Good, she hissed, leaning in close so only I could hear. Because Mr. Henderson has the paperwork for the bridge loan in his briefcase. We are going to sign it right after the cake cutting. It is a gift for your sister. Don't embarrass me. She patted my arm, the same arm she had bruised weeks ago, and fluttered away to greet the pastor. I watched her go. A month ago, that threat would have made me retreat to the kitchen, hyperventilating. Tonight, it just made me check my watch. 7 o'clock. The process server was due at 7:15. The party moved into full swing. Savannah and her fiancé, Trent, stood by the fireplace, accepting congratulations. Savannah was glowing, showing off a diamond ring that I suspected was also bought on credit. Mark stood near the bar, drinking faster than he should. He looked pale, his eyes darting around the room as if he expected the walls to collapse. He knew about the grandmother's trust clause now. He knew he was walking on a landmine, but he was too cowardly to tell Elaine to stop marching. At 7:10, Elaine clinked a silver spoon against her crystal champagne flute. The sharp ding-ding-ding silenced the room. "Everyone, please," she called out, beaming. "Gather round. I have a few words." The guests shuffled into a semicircle. I stayed near the back, near the entrance to the hallway. Logan was standing in the opposite corner, leaning against a bookshelf. He caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. He had his phone out, held casually at chest height, the camera lens exposed. "Tonight is about love," Elaine began, placing a hand on Savannah's shoulder. "It is about the future. When Mark and I brought our families together, we promised to always put our children first, and tonight, I am so proud to announce that we are making a significant investment in Savannah and Trent's new life." She paused for dramatic effect, looking directly at Mr. Henderson, who puffed out his chest. "We are gifting the happy couple the down payment for their own home in the hills," Elaine announced. The room gasped. "And we are doing this by leveraging the love and equity in this very house. It is a family effort." She turned her gaze to me. The spotlight of the room shifted. 40 people turned to look at the stepdaughter in the charcoal dress. "And I want to thank Angelina," Elaine said, her voice dripping with performative gratitude. "She has agreed to co-sign the loan to make this happen. She knows that family supports family. Isn't that right, Angelina?" It was the trap, the public pressure, the social contract that said I had to smile and nod or look like a monster. I took a sip of my water. I didn't step forward. I didn't smile. "Actually, Elaine," I said. My voice was calm, projecting clearly across the silent room. "I haven't agreed to anything." The silence that followed was heavy, instantaneous, and suffocating. Elaine's smile faltered, the edges twitching. "Don't be silly, dear. We discussed this. Mr. Henderson has the papers." "Mr. Henderson can have whatever he likes," I replied, holding her gaze. "But I have not seen the terms. I have not consented to a credit pull, and there are some significant legal clarifications regarding the ownership of this house that need to be resolved before any new debt is attached to it." "Legal clarifications?" Elaine let out a shrill, incredulous laugh. "You are ruining your sister's night with your petty jealousy? You are going to stand there and deny her a home because you are bitter?" Savannah, sensing the cue, let out a sob. "Angie, how could you? You promised you would help." "I never promised," I said. "And I think it is irresponsible to take out a loan on a property that is currently under investigation." "Investigation?" Mark choked on his drink. Elaine's face went from champagne pink to a blotchy red. She abandoned the sweet mother act. She stepped toward me, her finger pointing like a weapon. "You listen to me. You ungrateful little—" Knock, knock, knock. The sound of the heavy brass knocker on the front door echoed through the tense room like a gavel strike. Everyone froze. Elaine looked at the door, annoyed at the interruption. "Someone get that," she snapped at Mark. Mark didn't move. He was staring at me, terrified. "I will get it," I said. I turned and opened the front door. A man in a nondescript windbreaker stood there. He wasn't a guest. He held a thick envelope in his hand. Delivery for Elaine Larson and Mark Larson, he said professionally. They are right there, I said, stepping aside and gesturing to the living room. The man walked in. The guests parted for him. Sensing that this wasn't a party favor, he walked straight up to Elaine and Mark. Elaine Larson? He asked. Yes, she snapped. Who are you? We are in the middle of a toast. You are served, he said, thrusting the envelope into her hands. He turned to Mark and handed him a matching one. Courtesy of the county court. Elaine looked at the envelope. She looked at me. Then, with shaking hands, she ripped it open. I watched her eyes scan the top page. I knew exactly what it said. It was a temporary restraining order on assets. It was a notification that the title of the house at Ridgeview was frozen pending a fraud investigation. It was a demand for a forensic accounting of the $75,000 loan taken out 2 years ago. What is this? Elaine whispered. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like she might faint. Fraud? Investigation? Mr. Henderson, the mortgage broker, heard the word fraud. He stepped back, clutching his briefcase to his chest. Mrs. Larson, he stammered. If there is a lis pendens on the title, we cannot proceed. The bank won't touch a disputed asset. It is not disputed, Elaine shrieked, her voice cracking. She is lying. She is trying to steal my house. It is not your house, Elaine, I said. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. It is my grandmother's house, and the court knows about the trust. They know about the forged signature on the personal loan. They know everything. The room erupted into whispers. My aunts and uncles, the ones who had eaten Elaine's food and believed her stories for a decade, were looking at her with wide, horrified eyes. The word forged was bouncing around the room. Mark dropped his envelope. It hit the floor with a soft thud. He sank into the nearest chair, burying his face in his hands. It is over, he moaned. Elaine, I told you she knew. Shut up, Mark, Elaine screamed, turning on him. You useless coward. You are supposed to handle her. She whirled back to me, her eyes wild. You did this? You went behind my back? After everything I did for you? I gave you a home. You took my home, I corrected her. You took my credit. You took my inheritance. And you tried to take my dignity. But you are done. Savannah was wailing now, loud, ugly sobs about her wedding being ruined. But no one was comforting her. The guests were backing away, looking for their coats. The pastor was checking his watch, inching toward the door. Logan pushed off the bookshelf. He walked over to stand beside me. He didn't say a word, but his presence was a wall. He held up his phone, ensuring Elaine saw that the red recording light was blinking. Elaine looked at the papers in her hand, then at the mortgage broker retreating out the back door, then at the guests who were now looking at her not with envy, but with judgment. For the first time in 10 years, the script had been burned. She had no lines left. Get out, she hissed at me, her voice trembling with impotent rage. Get out of my house. I will leave, I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out my keys. The keys to the house I legally owned half of. I dropped them onto the side table. They made a loud metallic clatter. But don't get too comfortable. Elaine, the court date is on the paperwork. I suggest you start packing. I turned my back on the chaos I had orchestrated. I walked past the stunned relatives, past the sobbing stepsister, and out the front door into the cool night air. Logan followed me. We walked down the driveway, past the valet stand where the attendants were looking confused. Did you get it? I asked, my voice barely steady. Every second, Logan said. The denial, the accusation, the service, the reaction. It is admissible. It is perfect. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that didn't smell of lilies and lies. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of a prisoner who had just dug the last scoop of dirt out of the tunnel. Behind us, the house was still glowing, but inside, the lights were going out, one by one. The party was over. The trial had begun. I had barely made it to the edge of the foyer when the hand clamped around my upper arm. It was not a gentle hold, it was a vice grip, fingernails digging into the tender flesh of my bicep through the linen of my dress. "You are not walking away from this," Elaine hissed in my ear. Before I could wrench myself free or call out to Logan, she yanked me sideways, dragging me through the swinging door into the kitchen. She kicked the door shut behind us with her heel. The sudden silence of the kitchen, separated from the murmuring crowd, felt like the inside of a coffin. Elaine shoved me. It was a hard, physical push that sent me stumbling backward until my lower back collided painfully with the edge of the granite island. The breath left my lungs in a sharp gasp. "You vicious little snake!" she spat. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, unfiltered hatred. The charming hostess was gone. The weeping mother was gone. This was the real Elaine, the one who existed only when the lights were off. "You think you can humiliate me in my own house? You think you can bring a process server to my daughter's engagement party?" "It is not your house," I managed to say, straightening up and rubbing my back. "And it is not humiliation. It is the law." "The law?" Elaine laughed, a jagged, ugly sound. She stepped into my personal space, forcing me to press harder against the counter to maintain distance. "You have been listening to that failure of a cousin, haven't you? Logan and his cheap ambulance-chasing tactics. You think because you found some old paperwork you can destroy this family? You have let them poison your mind against the people who raised you." "You didn't raise me," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. "You used me." "I gave you a roof," she screamed, slamming her hand onto the counter inches from my hip. "I gave you a family when your father was too busy drowning in his own self-pity to look at you. And this is how you repay me? Because of one slap? One emotional moment where I lost my temper because you gave me a box of trash? You are going to ruin Savannah's life over a bruise?" She grabbed my wrist then, her fingers locking around it tight enough to cut off circulation. She pulled me forward, shaking my arm. "You are going to go back out there," she growled, her eyes manic. "And you are going to tell everyone that this is a mistake, that you were confused, that you are off your medication. You are going to fix this, Angelina, or I swear to God I will make sure you never work in this town again." The pain in my wrist was sharp, a burning reminder of the violence she was capable of. I looked at her, at the madness in her eyes, and I felt a cold surge of fear. She was desperate, and desperate people were dangerous. But just over Elaine's shoulder, through the crack of the pantry door that led to the back hallway, I saw a shadow move. Logan. He was standing there, perfectly still. He held his phone up, the black eye of the camera lens fixed on us. He didn't intervene. He didn't shout. He just watched, documenting the assault, collecting the ammunition. Elaine released me with a shove of disgust, smoothing her hair. "Fix your face," she commanded. "We are going back out there." She pushed through the swinging door, and I followed, rubbing my wrist. I had to follow. If I stayed in the kitchen, I was hiding. If I went out there, I was fighting. But the moment we stepped back into the living room, the atmosphere shifted. Elaine didn't look angry anymore. She looked devastated. She let out a choked sob, bringing a hand to her chest as she faced the room full of confused guests. "I am so sorry. Everyone," she wailed, her voice trembling with practiced sorrow. I don't know what to say. I tried to talk to her. I tried to reason with her." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "My own stepdaughter," she cried. "The girl I raised like my own flesh and blood for 10 years. She is suing us. She is suing her own father and me." A ripple of shock went through the room. "Suing?" someone whispered. "Her own parents?" "She is trying to evict us," Elaine continued, tears streaming down her face now, ruining her mascara in a way that looked tragically photogenic. "She wants to kick her father out of his home. She wants to cancel the loan for Savannah's wedding. She says we stole from her. Can you believe that? After everything we sacrificed?" I felt the room turn. It was a physical sensation, like the air pressure dropping before a storm. The guests, who moments ago had been shocked by the process server, were now swaying back toward the narrative they understood: the sacredness of family. My Uncle Bob, a man who believed loud voices equaled authority, stepped forward. He held a drink in one hand and looked at me with deep disappointment. "Now hold on. Angelina," he boomed. "Is this true? You are taking your folks to court? Over money?" "It is not just money," I pleaded, stepping into the center of the room. "They forged my signature. They took out $75,000 in my name without my knowledge. That is fraud." "Oh, stop it!" Elaine shrieked, cutting me off. "Stop lying. Mark, tell them. Tell them how we helped her." My father looked up from his chair. He looked broken, but his instinct for self-preservation kicked in, guided by years of Elaine's conditioning. He stood up shakily. We paid for everything," Mark stammered, addressing the room rather than me. "When she was in college, the food, the clothes, we supported her while she got her degree. We never asked for rent. We just wanted her to have a good start." "Dad," I gasped, feeling like I had been punched. "I paid my own tuition. I worked double shifts at the diner. The loans are in my name." "We co-signed," Mark argued, his voice rising, gaining confidence from the nodding heads around him. "We put our credit on the line for you, Angelina. And now you say we stole? We were a family. Families share. Why are you doing this?" "Because you are lying," I shouted, my voice cracking. "You are twisting everything." "She is jealous." The scream came from Savannah. She was standing in the middle of the room, her face blotchy, her engagement ring flashing under the chandelier. She looked at me with venom that matched her mother's. "That is what this is," Savannah yelled, pointing at me. "She has always been jealous. She hates that Daddy loves me. She hates that I'm getting married and she is alone. She couldn't stand to see me happy, so she made up all these lies to ruin my night. She wants to destroy my wedding because she is miserable." "Savannah, that is not true," I said, looking at the stepsister I had once tried to tutor, the girl whose prom dress I had hemmed. "I just want my name off the debt. I want my freedom." "You are selfish," Savannah screamed. "You are a selfish, bitter witch." "See?" Elaine sobbed, embracing Savannah. "This is what we deal with, the ingratitude, the hostility. We have kept it quiet for years to protect her reputation. But today she crossed the line." I looked around the room. I saw my Aunt Sarah shaking her head, whispering to her husband. "Shameful," I heard her say, "dragging the family through the mud like this." I saw Reverend Miller looking at the floor, clearly uncomfortable, but unwilling to defend the woman accused of attacking her parents. "Angelina," Uncle Bob said sternly, "you need to drop this nonsense. You apologize to your mother. You apologize to your father. You don't bring the law into a family home. Whatever dispute you have, you settle it at the dinner table, not with a judge. It makes us all look bad." "But they hit me," I said, my voice barely a whisper now. I touched my cheek. "Elaine hit me, on her birthday." "Oh, please," Elaine scoffed, rolling her eyes. "I tapped your face to calm you down because you were hysterical, and now you call it assault? You see? You see how she twists things?" "She is hysterical now," another cousin muttered. I stood there, surrounded by 40 people, and I had never felt more isolated in my life. The truth didn't matter here. Facts didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the story. And Elaine was a better storyteller. She had the tears. She had the outraged husband. She had the weeping bride. I was just the cold, calculating banker with the lawsuit. I felt a wave of exhaustion crash over me. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was the villain. Maybe I should just sign the papers, take on the debt, and disappear. It would be easier. The noise would stop. The accusations would stop. I could just walk out the door and never come back. Leave them the house. Leave them the money. Just to buy my peace. I took a step backward, toward the door. My hand was shaking so badly I had to clench it into a fist. I looked at Mark one last time, begging him silently to tell the truth, to admit about the grandmother's trust, to admit about the forged loan. He looked away. He picked up his glass and drained it. That was it. I was done. I turned to leave, defeated. The wall of noise, the accusations, the sobbing, the murmurs of disapproval felt like a physical wave pushing me out. But then I saw him. Logan. He hadn't moved from his spot in the corner. He hadn't said a word during the entire ambush. He had just stood there, holding his phone, his eyes scanning the room, recording every lie, every threat, every betrayal. He saw me falter. He saw the exact moment my shoulders slumped. And for the first time that night, he moved. He didn't walk toward me. He walked toward the center of the room, toward the large flat-screen television that was mounted above the fireplace, the television that was currently displaying a slideshow of Savannah and Trent's engagement photos. Logan didn't look angry. He looked clinical. He looked like a surgeon stepping up to an operating table. He realized what I had just realized, that my voice would never be loud enough to drown out their narrative. Words were useless against people who were committed to misunderstanding me. We didn't need an argument. We needed a mirror. Logan reached into his pocket and pulled out a connector cable. He unplugged the slideshow source and plugged in his phone. The screen went black for a second. The room didn't notice him at first. They were too busy watching Elaine comfort Savannah. Then, Logan picked up a heavy crystal glass from a nearby table and tapped it with a fork. It wasn't a polite ding. It was a sharp, aggressive clang that cut through the noise like a knife. "Excuse me," Logan said. His voice wasn't loud, but it projected with the trained resonance of a litigator. "If everyone is done explaining how terrible Angelina is, I think there is one more perspective we need to consider." "Logan, stay out of this," Mark warned, looking up. "This is family business." "I am family," Logan said calmly, "and I think the family deserves to know exactly what happened to that handmade gift you are all talking about, and what happened in the kitchen 5 minutes ago." He tapped his phone screen. The television flickered to life, the audio hissed, then clarified, and suddenly, the room wasn't looking at me anymore. They were looking at the screen. And what they saw was about to suck the air right out of the room. The room was suspended in a fragile, suffocating silence. All eyes were glued to the television screen where Logan had just connected his phone, the black rectangle looming over the fireplace like a judge's robe. But before Logan could press play, before the digital evidence could flood the room, the heavy brass knocker on the front door sounded again. It was not the sharp, professional rap of the process server who had just departed. This was a slow, deliberate, rhythmic knocking. Elaine, whose face was still twisted in a rictus of victimhood, snapped her head toward the hallway. "Who is it now?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Is this more of your circus, Angelina? Did you invite the police too?" I didn't answer. I was paralyzed, caught between the adrenaline of the confrontation and the deep, sickening pull of guilt that had been installed in me since I was 14. The door opened. It wasn't locked. A cane with a silver handle appeared first, tapping against the hardwood floor. Then came the man. He was elderly, perhaps in his late 70s, wearing a 3-piece tweed suit that seemed impervious to the passing of time. He moved slowly but with an air of absolute, unshakable authority. My breath hitched in my throat. It was Mr. Hayes. He had been my grandmother's lawyer. I hadn't seen him since her funeral, 15 years ago. He looked older, his skin like parchment, but his eyes behind his wire-rimmed glasses were as sharp as cut glass. "Mr. Hayes?" Mark whispered, half rising from his chair. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. "Mr. Hayes ignored my father. He ignored Elaine, who was staring at him with open hostility. He walked straight into the center of the room, the crowd parting for him instinctively, and stopped in front of me. "Hello, Angelina," he said. His voice was gravelly and warm, a sound from a better past. "I apologize for the intrusion, but young Logan here called me this afternoon and told me it was time." He nodded toward the corner where Logan stood. My cousin gave a small, grim smile. He had orchestrated this. He knew that while he had the digital evidence, we needed the historical weight. "Mr. Hayes reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a thick, creamy envelope. The wax seal on the back was broken, but the paper was yellowed with age. "What is that?" Elaine demanded, stepping forward. "This is a private party. You cannot just walk in here and—" "Quiet, madam," Mr. Hayes said. He didn't raise his voice, but the command was so absolute that Elaine actually shut her mouth. He turned back to me. "I have held this in my safe for 15 years. Angelina, your grandmother, Rose, gave me strict instructions. She said, 'Arthur, keep this until the day my granddaughter looks like she has forgotten who she is, or until the day the wolves are at the door.'" He handed me the envelope. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. "Read the letter first," Mr. Hayes instructed gently. I pulled out a single sheet of floral stationery. I recognized the handwriting immediately. The looping, elegant script of the woman who used to braid my hair and tell me I was smart. "My dearest Angie, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and things have become difficult. I am writing this because I worry. I worry about your father. He is a good man, but he is weak, and grief makes men do foolish things. I worry about the new woman he has brought into your life. I see the way she looks at this house. She looks at it like a calculator, not a home. I am leaving this house to you, my darling. Not to Mark, not to his wife, to you. But I know you have a kind heart, and I know they will try to use that against you. They will tell you that family shares. They will tell you that you are selfish if you do not give them everything. Do not listen. Do not let yourself be turned into a walking wallet just because you carry the name Larson. You are my legacy, not their bank account. If they cannot love you for who you are, they do not deserve to live under the roof I provided. Love, Grandma Rose." I finished reading, tears blurring my vision. A walking wallet. She had seen it. 15 years ago. She had looked at Elaine and seen the predator that I had spent a decade trying to please. "This is ridiculous," Elaine scoffed, though her voice wavered. "A letter from a dead woman? That is your proof?" Rose was senile at the end. She didn't know what she was writing. "She was of sound mind and body," Mr. Hayes corrected sharply. He pulled a second document from the envelope. It was a legal deed, stamped and notarized. "And this is her last will and testament, creating the conditional trust that holds the title to this property." He held the document up for the room to see. "The terms are explicit," Mr. Hayes announced, his voice projecting to the back of the room where the relatives were whispering. "The property at Ridgeview is the sole inheritance of Angelina Larson. Mark Larson was granted a right of residency, provided he maintained the asset. However, there is a forfeiture clause." He adjusted his glasses and read from the document. "If the trustee, that is Mark, or any of his associates, utilize the property or the beneficiary's credit to secure debt without the beneficiary's full, uncoerced consent, or if the environment within the home is deemed physically or emotionally harmful to the beneficiary, the right of residency is immediately revoked. Angelina has the right to liquidate the asset, retain 100% of the proceeds, and evict all occupants." The silence that followed was absolute. Elaine's face went white. She looked at the walls of the living room, the walls she had painted, the walls she had hung her expensive art on, and realized she was standing inside someone else's bank vault. That is not legal," Elaine stammered. "We have lived here for 10 years. We have squatters' rights. We have marriage rights." "You have nothing," Mr. Hayes said coldly. "You have a history of fraud, and if Angelina chooses to press the issue, the court will not only grant her the sale, but they will look at the mortgage fraud you committed 2 years ago as a criminal act, not just a civil one." "It is a lie!" Elaine screamed, losing her composure entirely. "She signed those papers. She wanted to help us. She is just changing her story now because she is jealous of Savannah." Mr. Hayes didn't argue. He reached into his briefcase, a battered leather satchel he had set on the floor, and pulled out a single sheet of printed paper. It wasn't old. It was a printout of an email. We ran a discovery on Mark's email server as part of the trust audit. Mr. Hayes said. Do you recognize this, Elaine? He handed the paper to Uncle Bob, who was standing closest. Bob looked at it, his eyes widening. Read it, Mr. Hayes commanded. Uncle Bob cleared his throat. He looked at Elaine, then at the paper, then at me. It is from Elaine to Mark, dated 3 years ago. Read the text, Mr. Hayes said. It says, Bob paused, looking uncomfortable. It says, stop worrying about Angelina. She is too desperate for us to like her. Just make the kid sign the papers. Once her name is on the debt, the house is practically ours. She won't dare sue us. She doesn't have the guts. A gasp went through the room. It wasn't a theatrical gasp. It was the sound of air being sucked out of 40 pairs of lungs. She won't dare sue us, someone whispered. She doesn't have the guts, another voice echoed. The guests looked at Elaine. The mask had fallen completely. This wasn't a mother trying to plan a wedding. This was a strategist who had banked on my emotional damage to fund her lifestyle. If that is true, Aunt Sarah whispered, looking at her sister-in-law with horror, then the loan for Savannah, the tuition, was that all Angelina? It was all Angelina, Logan said from the corner. His voice was low, but it carried. Every vacation, every car, every designer bag. You were all clapping for gifts that Angelina paid for, while Elaine slapped her for being cheap. Elaine looked around the room, frantic. She saw the judgment. She saw the disgust. She turned to Mark, grabbing his arm. Mark, say something. Tell them I was just managing the family finances. It was for us. Mark looked at the email in Bob's hand. He looked at the old lawyer who represented his mother. He looked at me, standing there with the letter that called him a weak man. He pulled his arm away from Elaine. It was a small gesture, but it was fatal. Elaine gasped, stumbling back as if he had pushed her. You coward, she hissed at him. But even with the truth laid bare, even with the law on my side and the room turning against her, I felt a wave of nausea. I looked at Savannah, who was sobbing into her hands, her engagement party in ruins. I looked at my father, who looked like a man watching his life burn down. The voice in my head, the voice Elaine had planted there, started to scream, You are destroying this family. You are selfish. You are making a scene. Just stop. Just fix it. I looked at Mr. Hayes. Maybe, I started, my voice trembling. Maybe we don't need to evict them right away. Maybe we can just work out a payment plan. Angelina, Mr. Hayes warned, stepping closer, do not do this. Do not let them negotiate with your life. But they are family, I whispered, the tears finally spilling over. If I sell the house, where will they go? Savannah, she is getting married. She is not getting married, Elaine shouted, seizing on my hesitation. Because you ruined it, you selfish little witch. You have always wanted to see us fail. See? Logan's voice cut in. She is doing it again. Even when she is caught, she attacks. I looked at Logan. He had watched me waver. He knew that the legal victory wasn't enough. The law could win the house, but it couldn't win the war for my sanity. As long as these people, my relatives, thought there was even a sliver of ambiguity, as long as they thought this was just a dispute, I would always be the villain in their story. I would always be the daughter who evicted her parents. I needed to kill the doubt. I needed to show them exactly what family meant to Elaine Larson. Logan saw the resolve harden in my eyes. He saw me nod. He reached for the chair next to the television. He dragged it to the center of the room, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. He stood up on it, rising above the crowd, turning his back to the screen he had prepared. He looked at the aunts and uncles. He looked at the pastor. He looked at Savannah. Angelina is trying to be kind, Logan said, his voice ringing out with a terrifying clarity. She is trying to save you all from the ugly truth because she has been trained to protect the people who hurt her. But I haven't been trained. He looked at Elaine. You called her a liar. You said she imagined the abuse. You said the slap was a tap to calm her down. Logan pointed the remote control at the television behind him. If everyone wants to know what really happened to that handmade gift, and if everyone wants to know why Angelina is standing here with a bruise she tried to hide with makeup, then you need to stop listening to the lies and start watching the screen. He pressed the button. Logan tapped his knuckles against the glass of the television screen, a dull thud that somehow echoed louder than a scream. He didn't need to shout to get their attention anymore. Curiosity, morbid and magnetic, had already silenced the room. If everyone wants to know what really happened to that handmade gift, Logan said, his voice slicing through the tension like a razor, and if everyone wants to know why Angelina is standing here with a bruise she tried to hide with makeup, then you need to stop listening to the lies and start watching the screen. He pressed play. The 60-inch television, usually reserved for Mark's football games, flared to life. The footage was vertical, clearly shot on a phone, but the resolution was crisp. It was the birthday party. There was Elaine, looking radiant in her silk dress. There was the pile of shattered walnut wood on the floor. And then, the sound. The audio on the video was perfect. Elaine's laugh rang out, cruel and mocking. A memory box? Is this a joke? The guests in the room shifted uncomfortably. I saw Aunt Sarah bring a hand to her mouth. She had been laughing in the video too. Now, watching herself join in the mockery of a nervous stepdaughter, she looked sick. Then came the slap. On the screen, Elaine's arm moved with terrifying speed. The sound of the impact, crack, was amplified by the living room speakers. It sounded like a gunshot. In the room, a collective gasp sucked the air out of the space. It was visceral. Seeing it replayed stripped away all the excuses. It wasn't a tap. It wasn't a motherly correction. It was a violent, unprovoked assault on a woman who was just standing there with her hands empty. Elaine stood frozen, staring at the screen. Her face was a mask of horror, not because of what she had done, but because she was seeing her own carefully crafted mask disintegrate in high definition. That, Uncle Bob stammered, his earlier confidence evaporating. That was not a tap. Logan didn't stop there. And for anyone thinking that was an isolated incident, he said, swiping his finger across the phone screen. This was recorded 20 minutes ago, in the kitchen, while you were all eating appetizers. The second video played. The angle was from the pantry, peeking through the crack in the door. It showed Elaine shoving me against the granite counter. It showed her gripping my arm, her face twisted into a snarl. Her voice hissed through the speakers. You are going to go back out there, and you are going to tell everyone that this is a mistake, or I swear to God, I will make sure you never work in this town again. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence that followed was heavy, tangible, and suffocating. I looked at the faces of my relatives. The judgment had shifted. They weren't looking at the ungrateful daughter anymore. They were looking at the woman who had threatened to destroy a young woman's career because she dared to speak the truth. Logan turned to face the room. If this is how you all think a mother treats a daughter, he said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage, then fine, accept it. But at the very least, do not stand there and tell Angelina she has to pay for the privilege of being abused. Do not tell her she has to carry $75,000 of debt for the woman who slams her against cabinets. Mr. Hayes stepped forward, his cane tapping a final punctuation mark on the moment. Based on what we have just seen, the lawyer announced, his voice dry and authoritative, and combined with the forensic accounting of the coerced loans, the court will have no trouble granting Angelina full partition rights. We will be moving to sell the property immediately to liquidate the debt. Furthermore, we will be submitting this footage to the district attorney as evidence of domestic battery and extortion. No! Elaine screamed. The sound was feral. She lunged toward Logan, but Mark grabbed her arm, not to support her this time, but to restrain her. Stop it, Elaine, Mark said, his voice hoarse. Let go of me, she shrieked, struggling against him. She is ruining us. After everything I did, I raised her. I fed her. She is an ungrateful, miserable little brat who wants to destroy our happiness because she cannot find a man of her own." "Elaine, shut up," Uncle Bob said. It was the first time I had ever heard him speak to her without deference. He looked at me, then at Mark. "Mark, did you know? Did you know she was treating the girl like that?" Mark looked at the floor. He looked at the whiskey glass in his hand as if it held the answers. I told her to stop," he mumbled weakly. "I tried to keep the peace." "You watched," I said. My voice was quiet, but in the dead silence of the room, it carried to every corner. "You watched her slap me. You watched her spend my money. You watched her steal my identity. You didn't try to keep the peace. Dad, you tried to keep your comfort." Mark flinched as if I had hit him. He looked up, tears streaming down his face, but I felt nothing. The well of sympathy I had drawn from for 10 years was finally, completely dry. Savannah, realizing the tide had turned, burst into fresh tears. She ran to the center of the room, stomping her foot like a child. "This isn't fair," she wailed, clutching her engagement ring. "What about my wedding? What about my house? We were supposed to sign the papers tonight. You can't just sell the house. Angie, you are killing my dream." I looked at my stepsister. I saw the fear in her eyes. Not fear for me, or for her mother, but fear that the endless stream of money was finally being turned off. "Savannah," I said, my voice steady, "there is no loan, there is no down payment, and there is no house." "But I told Trent," she screamed. "I promised him." "Then you lied to him," I said. "Just like your mother lied to you. You cannot build a marriage on a foundation of theft." I looked around the room. "Does anyone else think I should sign that loan?" I asked. "Does anyone here want to volunteer to pay for Savannah's wedding using their own credit score?" Silence. Aunt Sarah looked down. Uncle Bob adjusted his tie. The pastor cleared his throat and took a step toward the exit. "That is what I thought," I said. I walked over to the entry table. I reached into my purse and pulled out the set of keys to the house my grandmother had bought, the house I had cleaned, the house I had paid for. The metal keys jangled as I dropped them onto the polished wood surface. "I am initiating the sale proceedings tomorrow," I announced. "Mr. Hayes will handle the eviction notices. I will use the proceeds to pay off the debts you took out in my name. Whatever is left, if there is anything left, you can fight over in divorce court." "You can't leave us with nothing," Elaine whispered, her fight draining away as the reality set in. "We have nowhere to go." "You have each other," I said. "And you have Savannah's designer bags. Maybe you can sell those." I turned my back on them. I walked toward the heavy oak door. I could hear Mark sobbing behind me, a low, broken sound. "Angie," he called out, "please, don't go like this. We can fix it. We can go to therapy." I paused, my hand on the doorknob. I looked back at the tableau of my former life, the shattered wood on the floor, the weeping sister, the broken father, the exposed stepmother. "The house my grandmother left was the only place I thought I had a family," I said. "But I realized tonight that it wasn't a home. It was just a collateral asset. From today on, it is just a legal problem to be solved." I opened the door. The night air rushed in, cool and clean, smelling of rain and freedom. "Family," I said, looking Mark in the eye one last time, "is the place where you don't get slapped for giving a gift." I stepped out onto the porch. Logan was right beside me. We walked down the steps, past the confused valet, and onto the driveway. Behind us, the noise exploded again, shouting, crying, the sound of blame being thrown back and forth like a hot coal. But it sounded distant, like a radio playing in another room. It wasn't my noise anymore. We reached Logan's car parked at the curb. The streetlights were humming. I looked down at my hand. The red marks from Elaine's grip were still there, fading but visible. My cheek still throbbed, but my hands were steady. "You okay?" Logan asked, unlocking the car. I looked back at the house one last time. The lights were still on, blazing in the darkness, but the spell was broken. It was just a building, just wood and brick and bad memories. No, I said, sliding into the passenger seat. I am not okay, but I am free. Logan smiled, started the engine, and we drove away into the dark, leaving the fire to burn itself out in the rearview mirror. Thank you so much for listening to my story on the Lila Revenge Stories channel. I really hope you enjoyed seeing Angelina finally take her power back. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please comment your country or city down below so we can say hi. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and press the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. See you in the next video.